Hey, it's Webs here, and it's time to go over the new nerfs and buffs that were released today in Hearthstone, and one that will actually shock you on how big it was since it obliterated the card in question. And this card being Drek'thar. I'm actually really shocked that they're changing this, especially given the fact that they did sell a diamond version of it. People who actually did buy Drek'thar are going to get 3,000 gold in compensation, and the nerf to Drek'thar is he'll only summon one minion instead of two. This absolutely destroys the card, which is a little bit frustrating just because there were a lot of neat little ideas that you could do with a build around card such as this, but it was something that was absolutely needed, especially given the fact that Demon Hunter exists and you could so easily use this and just blow out your opponent without much thought whenever you did play it. And while this means I probably won't have any Drek'thar decks in the future, I think it will be overall a good change for the health of the game. The next change is to multi-strike, which is going to have a increased of cost by 1, so it's going to cost 2 instead of 1. This honestly doesn't change it too much. I could honestly see this seeing a lot of play still, especially with Dread Prison Glaive that most people actually pair it with. It might cause the rise of a questline variant of Naga Demon Hunter, but outside of that, I don't honestly think this changes how a card like this is actually going to see play, as it's just such a good card that can allow you to do a bunch of damage to your opponent's face, while also removing one of their minions. The next card that's getting changed is Dragonbane Shot, increasing the cost up to 3 instead of 2. This will slow down Questline Hunter by quite a bit, I would say, in my opinion, but it doesn't absolutely kill the deck, as this does allow you to still have a reoccurring way to trigger your questline, and even increasing its cost by 1 isn't big enough of a change to make it not see play, as it's probably one of the best type of direct damage spells that you can actually have in Hunter right now, but it honestly should have always cost 3 instead of 2. I'm shocked that it didn't, and it was going to be a problem no matter what. I'm happy they're dealing with it right now. Now let's get to the buffs. First one is going to be the Demon Hunter Colossus minion, which is Stalks are going to deal 2 damage instead of 1. I know Blizzard said there were a lot of ways that they were trying to figure out to actually make this card a lot more playable, such as reducing his costs, increasing the rate where the damage actually scales off of his main body, or even the way that they actually did by increasing the baseline damage. I think this is honestly the best solution out of all of them that they probably could have chose, and has been a card that I've been really wanting to make a deck centered around for quite a while now at this point. Though, because Demon Hunter sadly doesn't have a way to get a bunch of additional copies, I don't know how much more this will actually be playable, as you don't have a easy enough reliable way to actually clear out your opponent's board and then slam this down. If you do, that's 8 damage to face, and if you can duplicate it in some way, that could be even more damage, which might be a fun idea for the future. But until I can actually think of some type of strategy, this one will just stick in my brain until then, and I'm really happy to see this change, as it does seem they are trying to make it a little bit more playable, and he was probably the coolest colossal minion that was revealed. Hunter is getting some changes to Big Hunter, the first one being to Harpoon Gun, which is making the cost of the Dredged Beast reduced by 3 instead of 2. It might push Big Hunter in front of Questline Hunter, though I very much doubt it, as Questline does seem to not be losing too much within all of these changes. Pet Collector is becoming a 4/4. This should have been the case already from the start. Given modern Hearthstone, I don't see why it wasn't a 4/4 to actually begin with. Sure, it would have made it a little bit strong, but Big Hunter really needs to be really strong for it to actually see a lot of play. Ajaran Saber is also getting 1 additional attack, which makes it better for removal, and this is honestly just a pretty good change overall. I'm really happy to see Big Hunter actually seeing some buffs, as it is a deck that I really do enjoy playing, and I can't wait to actually try this out in the future. The Colossal minion for Priest is getting a reduction in its mana cost to 7 instead of 8, which is an overall decent change. It doesn't really matter too much, I would say, in Priest outside of Questline Priest, where you're losing your best 8 target, but given them one of the other changes, you do have an easy replacement for that type of deck. I do think this will make it a little bit more playable, but it doesn't really fit in any existing priest decks just by itself. If you can randomly generate it, great. But outside of that, honestly, I don't think this will make the cards see a lot more play. Whirlpool is getting a reduction in cost also to being 8 instead of 9. This is a really cool change overall. It does give access to Priest having 3 school spells instead of 2 for multicaster, which might make it a little bit better overall. And I do think this will probably replace the Blackwater Behemoth as a 8 cost for the questline decks, as this is just a removal tool that you would maybe want to run anyways. And who knows, maybe you could make some really weird, wacky, unique deck where you're purposely running a bunch of minions that a lot of decks commonly run just to nuke them out of both your deck and your opponent's deck, while using some cards like the Amulet of Undying to just overwhelm your opponent with a bunch of big minions. Could be a really fun strategy to try out. The next change is to Shadowcloth Needle, which is the equipment for Priest. And instead of being cost 2, it costs 1. With this only having 3 durability, this probably should have always just cost 1. I don't think this will change too much. It does give Shadow Priest access to a AoE that the deck was currently missing, unless you ran some cards that could randomly generate some holy spells, which is something that it much needed. This sadly doesn't scale with shadow damage, and because there's not too many shadow spells in rotation that are cheap enough where you can trigger this back to back to back, I don't think this will see much play, but you never know. The last priest card that's getting changed is Serpent Wig, which is getting a increase on the buff that it's actually giving to whatever minion, to being a +1/+2 instead of a 1/1. Overall, a really decent change. I know Naga Priest has been kind of floating around right now. People are trying to figure out that deck. I would have loved to see something to Lyra the Sun Shard, but I do see a reason why they wouldn't want to actually do something like this, mainly due to the fact that Wild does exist, and I know this card might be a problem in Wild if it isn't just a problem in Standard, and they don't want to make it inconsistent between the 2 game modes, as that might be a little bit confusing for new players. Sadly, this card will not actually probably see any play until we see more additional support, but it is cool to see Serpent Wig actually get a little bit of buff, because that is kind of a buff to Lyra indirectly. Now for rogues, we're seeing a buff to a bunch of the cards used for Thief Rogue, the first one being Tooth of Nefarian, which is reducing its cost by 1, so now it costs 2 instead of 3. This is perfect for the deck that I just posted this week, as it serves as a better early game removal tool to do 3 damage. It's very similar to Frostbite as what it can actually do, so I'm actually kind of shocked it didn't actually cost 2 already. I think this will make it a little bit more playable overall, and might actually push Thief Rogue to be a more meta relevant deck, especially given some of the other changes. SI Smuggler is also getting buffed. Instead of starting at 0, it's starting at 1, which puts it in line with how it used to actually work before they actually decided to nerf it for some weird reason. It never made any sense for them to actually nerf this card, but I guess they were just trying to be consistent with the wording, and they decided to fix a bug. They should have changed it to be starting at a 1 cost minion when they made that change originally, but for some reason they just now are doing it. Wildpaw Null is getting buffed back up to where it was before. This is a really cool change, especially because with Sir Finley you can easily just get a 0 cost one of these on turn 1 if you're lucky enough with all the cards that you actually put in the deck. Also helps Thief Rogue a lot, given the fact that I just posted about Thief Rogue. This is a really cool change overall to see. Tess Greymane is also getting a reduction in her cost by 1. Also a really good change for Thief Rogue, as this will allow you to play her in combination with Bran Bronzebeard, which is a pretty neat little combo if you have enough cards that you want to actually duplicate twice. Hench Clan Burglar is getting 1 additional HP. Decent enough change. I just didn't have any room in my list to put him in, but if I did, I would have. And he does have the pirate tag, so this does also help out Pirate Rogue. Overall, cool change. Probably doesn't change much. For Warlock, we're seeing the Syracuse Cultist getting an additional 1/1. While this is a welcome change, the deck doesn't really rely on having minions stick on the board. It relies on actually putting curses in your opponent's hand. I think if they have reduced the cost by 1, that would have honestly been a better overall change, but this does make it a little bit more sticky for some of the early game removal tools that could easily remove it before. Drag Below is getting its cost reduced by 1. Another nice change for Curse Warlock, and probably going to be the one that actually matters a lot more than the +1/+1 to the cultists. Honestly, was needed to move the deck forward and might actually push Curse Warlock to be a more meta relevant deck, and it is something that I really wanted to touch upon anyways in the future. Bajaran Scavenger and its Sunken counterpart are actually getting its costs reduced by 1 and also getting its stats reduced by 1/1. This doesn't really change too much in the overall deck. It does allow you to easily buff up the tide colors a little bit more, and probably will make Murloc Warlock a little bit better at swarming the field with a bunch of cheap Murlocs, unlike what it could be before. And then Blood Scent Vilefin is also getting a reduction in its cost and its attack by 1, which is also another really good change for Murlocs, as Murloc Warlock, as I found out, suffers from the issue of not being able to swarm the board really quickly. It allows you to have a lot of really big Murlocs, but you don't always have the easy ability to play down more than 1 or 2 Murlocs in a given turn, which is not something a stereotypical Murloc deck would want to do. Alright, so that was all the changes actually done today for Hearthstone Standard. Let me know which ones you're actually looking forward to actually being changed, and which ones you actually think will matter in the end. I'm going to put in the comment sections down below a link to the Thief Rogue video that I have and the Murloc Warlock video, just in case you wanted to play either of those decks. And like always, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, bye bye.